In this video for section 3.1, we're going to be talking about minimum and maximum values of a quadratic function. And for a quadratic function, it's either going to have a minimum or a maximum value. One or the other, but it can't have both. If the leading coefficient is positive, then that means that the parabola is going to open upward. So it's going to look something like this. And that means that it's going to have a minimum point or a lowest point. And the minimum or maximum value, whichever it is always going to occur at the vertex of the parabola. So to find the minimum, we find the vertex. Or to find the maximum, we find the vertex. So if a is greater than 0, parabola opens up and it has a minimum. If a is less than 0, or if a is negative, that means the parabola is going to open downward. And that means that it's going to have a maximum value at the vertex. The formula for finding the vertex is the same regardless of whether it's a minimum or a maximum, and we talked about this earlier. First you find the x-coordinate using negative b over 2a, then you plug that into the function to find the y-coordinate. So we're going to look at example 4. It says to consider the quadratic function f of x equals negative 3x squared plus 6x minus 13. Part A says to determine without graphing whether the function has a minimum value or a maximum value. So for that we need to look at the leading coefficient, or the a. In this case a is negative 3. And since it is negative, that means that it's going to have a maximum value. And I wouldn't try to memorize, whether positive a goes with minimum, negative a goes with maximum. I would just try to visualize the graph. If a is negative, that means the parabola is going to open down. If it opens down, it's going to look like this. And if it looks like this point is going to be the highest point, so it's going to be a maximum. It says without graphing, that means without plotting points formally, but visualizing the graph I think is the easiest way to figure out whether it's going to be a maximum or a minimum point. Part B says to find the minimum or maximum value and determine where it occurs. So first we need to find the x-coordinate. The where it occurs is going to be the x-coordinate. The minimum or maximum value itself is the y-coordinate. So for the x-coordinate, we're doing negative b over 2a. And so that's going to be negative 6 over 2 times negative 3. Negative 6 over negative 6 is positive 1. And then, so that's going to be the where it occurs. The maximum value is the function value, so we plug in 1 for x. That's going to be negative 3 times 1 squared plus 6 times 1 minus 13. So type that into a calculator or just write it out. Negative 3 times 1 is negative 3 plus 6 minus 13. Add that all together, that equals negative 10. So in terms of a sentence, and this is how you're going to see it in the homework, the maximum value is negative 10. So that's the y-coordinate, and it occurs at, and they're going to put x equals there. That should be a clue to you that you put the x-coordinate in the box where it says it occurs at. So it occurs at x equals 1. And lastly, we're asked to identify the function's domain and range. So we're going to get even more practice with this. Domain, since it's a quadratic function, negative infinity to positive infinity, just like when we were doing quadratic functions before, and the range. Now for the range, I think it's helpful again to go back to the picture here. So because this is a function that's going to open down, because a is negative, it has a maximum value. Because it has a maximum value, the range is going to go from negative infinity up to the y-coordinate of this point. What's the y-coordinate of this point? Negative 10. So my range is going to be negative infinity, comma, negative 10. And with parabolas, with quadratic functions, we always include that endpoint, so it's a square bracket around that. Remember, infinities always have parentheses. So my range is negative infinity to negative 10. For a parabola that opens upward, my range is going to start at that number and then go up to positive infinity. So picturing what the graph looks like can help you figure out what the range is supposed to be. So next you should look at checkpoint problem number 4. Do this in your notes, check your answer, and then you can do the homework.